Hello, my Italian food fanatics. Today, we're going to make another variation on the Margherita omelet. This one is even more in the reach of everyone because I'm using sun-dried tomatoes that were packed in oil. You can just buy them off the shelf. Now, I got to be honest, it's not going to be as good as the oven-dried tomatoes in the other Margherita omelet that I've made for you. However, it's a very, very good substitute. And it's also a way to use up the oil that these sun-dried tomatoes are stored in. All right? I've done it a different way. We're going to do it in a completely different way than what you've seen before with regard to how we put the basil in and also the sun-dried tomatoes. So I hope you enjoy it. It's going to be phenomenal. But before we go into the kitchen and I show you how to make it, please thumbs up, like, subscribe, share, ring the bell, and leave us a comment if you feel inclined. I'd love to get a dialogue going with you if you like, and if there's any way that I can help you with your cooking, please let me know. So without any further ado, I'll see you in la cucina. Hello, my Italian food fanatics. Today we're going to make another variation on the Margherita omelet, except this time we're going to be using sun-dried tomatoes, and we'll use the oil that the sun-dried tomatoes are in. We're also going to use mozzarella, we're going to use pecorino romano, and of course the ubiquitous basil. I'm going to do this in a different way than what you've seen before. That way, if you don't have the oven-dried tomatoes or don't want to make them, here's another variation that's similar to that. All right, my Italian food fanatics, you know how we do this. If you've watched any of my other egg videos, we crack the egg into a bowl first, and then we can put it in our larger bowl. That way we're sure that there's no issues with any sort of eggshells or any other anomalies or problems, and that way a large bowl full of eggs already will not be contaminated by one. All right, so there we go. No anomalies, no problems. These are free-range organic eggs. You'll notice that they're brown shelled. That has nothing to do with the fact that they're organic or free-range. It has to do with the breed of the chicken. The yolks, on the other hand, their color can be manipulated by the diet of the chicken. All right? So the yolks are really an indicator of what the chicken is eating as opposed to the shell. It could be a white shell, it could be brown, it could be yellow with blue speckles, which I believe is found in South America. There's all kinds of different eggs. So this has the breed, remember that. All right, we'll be back and mix these up. All right, my Italian food fanatics, we are back. And we are going to beat the living daylights out of these eggs. The more you beat them and break them down, the smoother and more velvety and better the omelet is going to be, okay? And you won't have those white streaks that are in the omelet. In fact, believe it or not, in order to fully get rid of all of those, you'd have to put this in a blender or use an immersion blender to really break it up. You're still going to get a little bit of white streaks in there, but the more you scramble the eggs like this, the less of that is going to, the less white little streaks that you're going to get, okay? So make sure you beat this really, really well. Now, I'm not going to waste your time and do this in front of you, so we'll come back when this is done and we're ready to move on to the next stage. All right, my Italian food fanatics, we are done beating the eggs, and now we are going to take some of these sun-dried tomatoes and we'll use them as the tomato product in the Margherita. I'm not going to use too many, or too much essentially. These are all cut into julienne strips, as you can see, the more elongated strips. And these are not easy to eat. You don't want this hanging out of your mouth, especially if you're going to eat with a fork. So what we'll do is we'll just turn them to the side and slice them all so that they're manageable, smaller pieces. And what we're going to do is take these tomatoes sun-dried tomatoes, and we'll put them into the egg. All right. So there we go. And we'll be back. All right, so we have our sun-dried tomatoes, and let's mix these up into the eggs pretty good. And that's ready to go. Next, we're going to shred some mozzarella. I'm using the dried mozzarella, or the full. There's full fat mozzarella, but it's not the fresh. It's the dried, and the reason for that is because of wetness. The fresh mozzarella is too wet to be using with eggs. You don't want to mix water with eggs. It's the same reason why, adding cream and stuff like that into your scrambled eggs like we have here is also, in my opinion, not a good idea, because there's a lot of water in there and it just waters everything down. It doesn't cook right. If you're used to making scrambled eggs, for example, with milk or by adding water or what have you, water is better than milk. But I don't like to add any sort of other liquid in there unless there's a specific reason for it. If you want to add a liqueur to make a particular type of thing, like you're making a zabaglione or something to that effect. But other than that, it's best to only have the eggs. All right, and I'm using large eggs, and I use 3, of course, as you saw. So let us continue, and we will grate the pecorino romano separately and fresh on top. And there's another reason why you haven't seen me add any sort of salt. The sun-dried tomatoes are going to have some sodium in them, and this is going to be salty as well. And I believe that in total is going to be enough salt. Plus, if you don't add salt to these eggs, they'll remain more tender, believe it or not. And it is noticeable. If you had one next to the other, you would notice. Try it and see for yourself. We're ready to move to the stove. Let's go do it. All right, my Italian food fanatics, we're here at the stove. I'm going to turn the heat up. Now, an omelet in this version, and a lot of the versions that I do, especially the classic omelet, is going to go at very high heat. All right, I'm going to let this heat up, and instead of using olive oil or the or California olive oil that I normally use, I am going to use a little bit of the oil that these sun-dried tomatoes came in. All right, so now the flavors of the sun-dried tomatoes also amalgamate with the egg and the sun-dried tomatoes that we have in there as well. All right, so it is one homogeneous flavor, and you got to know that the color is going to affect it a tiny little bit, and also it'll affect the flavor. Now, you may be against this because there are other herbs and things like that in there, and you would be right. However, I can tell you from tasting this many, many times that will not really affect the final product. It's just nice to be able to use some of that oil inside and utilize that oil, because a lot of times we'll be done with a bottle of the sun-dried tomatoes. There'll be oil left in there, and the oil is just discarded, which is essentially a waste. All right, so we'll let this come up to temperature, and I'll be right back. All right, my Italian food fanatics, we are back. Now, before I start in, I want to let you know that when you make an omelet, there's 2 motions. This pan with the least dominant hand is going to go back and forth this way, and then with the fork, you're going to stir in a counterclockwise direction. Okay? So, you should watch my tutorial on making a classic omelet if you want a full explanation of everything. This now goes in. Make sure we got all of that stuff in there, all the goodness. And then, as you can see, I go back and forth and stir. And it's on full, high heat, all right? A classic omelet takes very little time to make, and it's delicious. Every once in a while, you want to scrape the sides just like this. And we're almost done. Just let it come together a little bit more. Just a little bit more, and we're done. Okay, so now all we do is bring all of these eggs back in. Okay, just like this. So essentially an omelet is scrambled eggs that are put together. All right, so there we go. Now, some people will think that this is underdone, but it really is not underdone. It's really perfectly done. Now we'll add our Parmesan cheese in here. We'll grate some Pecorino Romano onto that. All right, and now we're going to do something a little bit different. Not that what we haven't done already has not been different, but we're going to lay the basil in this way. To just everything is on the inside of the omelet now, as opposed to being on the outside. Let's add one more little leaf in there, because I really do love the taste of basil. There we are. Now we'll clean this stuff off. Be careful if you try to do that. The pan is extremely hot, but my fingers are used to stuff like this, so it's not a big deal for me. But for you, it might be a little bit too much to handle right off the bat. All right, here we go. So our omelet is essentially done. All we have to do now is plate it up. All right. Very simple on how to do this. Take the omelet one side and fold it over. That's all right. It's not a problem. You won't see that side. That's because it's overstuffed. All right. Now, if we take this omelet and the pan and the... There you go. Now, even though that is showing, we can tuck all this stuff in there like this. I don't know if you can see. We can get rid of that. That didn't look too good. And there you go. There is your Margherita omelet with sun-dried tomatoes. Hello, my Italian food fanatics. So you saw the whole thing. You saw the way it all came together. You saw me plate the omelet. You saw the way the basil was going in there, the way we incorporated the sun-dried tomatoes and the oil and the Pecorino Romano and, of course, the mozzarella cheese and how it even if you have a little break in it, like you saw with mine, because there's a lot of stuffing in this one, you can fix all of those anomalies and issues. It's not a problem. In fact, believe it or not, the higher you go up on the fine dining chain, the more hands are used to fix the food that you eat and manipulate it, believe it or not. It has to, because they have to make it perfect. And so, consequently, having your hands in the food is not a bad thing. In fact, I truly believe that I would rather have somebody use their bare hands as opposed to gloves, because with your bare hands you can feel the dirt on the hands, so they're apt to wash them more often than they are when they're wearing gloves. I don't like to see gloves on anyone serving or making food at all. It seems unsanitary, but it is counterintuitive, because again, like I said, you don't feel anything when you have the gloves on. You think that it's totally normal. So unless, of course, those gloves are constantly being changed. Anyway, enough about that. Here is the omelette. Oh, look at this. Now, you saw the way that I like to have it just slightly underdone to make it creamy on the inside. And let's see if this is the case. You know that chew that you get with sun-dried tomatoes? You get that here as well. And you get that intense tomatoey flavor, along, of course, with the freshness of the basil and the creaminess of the mozzarella cheese. And, of course, the pecorino romano adds another layer, another je ne sais quoi, including saltiness, too. That is an excellent substitute for the oven-dried tomatoes. If you don't have time or you don't want to make the oven-dried tomatoes, the oven-dried tomatoes take 8 hours at 190 degrees. Minimum. I could have gone even longer. They would have been better. But 8 hours, that's a lot to ask of anybody, even though it's unattended. Look at that, the stringiness of the mozzarella. Oh, how beautiful that is. Really, really good. And I like, in this variation, believe it or not, I like the larger pieces of basil. I love basil, and having them big like that, just the flavor of basil is really good. Now, this flies in the face of probably traditional Italians. They just have basil for just a tiny bit of flavor. But you have to remember, this basil goes in raw. It's not cooked at all. And there's no way for those oils to seep in and into the egg and the dish itself. So for that reason, I feel it's apropos. I just tear them so they don't bruise or anything like that. And they just look good. They taste just fabulous. Anyway, I don't know why you're still watching me eat. Please like, subscribe, thumbs up, ring the bell, share, and leave a comment too. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Thanks for watching. And I hope to see you again very soon in La Cucina. Talk to you later. Thanks. Bye-bye.